Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Jen Rogers, and I'm really excited about this session because today we are talking about women and the sandwich generation. How to make sure women that are caring for their parents and their children are also taking care of their own financial planning. It's not easy. But here to help us and talking to us today, we've got Lena Haas, Edward Jones, Head of Wealth Management Solutions and Advice, and Dr. Joe Coughlin, Director at MIT Age Lab. Hi, guys. Also, before we start, we want to hear from you. So please, come get in the chat, drop some questions in. We have a poll there. Really, this is going to be a great conversation, but if you can get involved, fantastic. Put some questions in there for us. But let's get started. And Lena, I want you to kick it off because I think if you're in it, you know it and you feel it, but let's make sure we're all on the same page to begin with. What is the sandwich generation and what's the challenge to women's finances with it?
Hello, it's great to be here. And Jen, sandwich generation is comprised of people who are caring for both children and elderly parents or relatives at the same time. They're literally sandwiched in their caretaking responsibilities, hence the name. And so Edward Jones did a survey in collaboration with Next 360 Partners and Morningstar Consult. And what we found is that women in the sandwich generation, almost half of them reported being sole caregivers to their children. Slightly more than half also reported being sole caregivers to elderly parents or relatives. And it's a lot. Being caregivers that way is taking just financial as well as emotional toll on these women. Juggling different responsibilities really makes women deprioritize their own needs, their own wants, so that they can care for everybody else's.
So, Dr. Joe, it's not exactly a new phenomenon. We have been talking about it, hearing about this issue for a long time, but something does feel a little different. I mean, what has changed in terms of the sandwich generation recently?
Great. Jen, great to be here. Lena, always awesome to work with you. Yeah, you know what's changed is the velocity, the volume, and the sheer complexity of caregiving. Longevity, living longer, has changed everything. It used to be nice and easy. Well, it was never easy, but having children and having parents and managing your own home. But think about this, with longer lives, your grandparents are likely to still be alive. In China, they call it the 4-2-1 problem: four grandparents, two parents, with only one adult child stepping in. No, women today are not just working and providing, shall we say, care. They're essentially living in a high velocity paninied generation, not a sandwich generation, feeling that pressure. She's the confidant of adult children. She's the consumer of her own home and the caregiver of many.
Yeah, I mean, there really is a lot of pressure from all sides. I like that, the panini. You get you get the sense that you're just getting squeezed here. So part of this is financial, right? Everybody has financial pressures, but you add this on top of all the pressures coming at you. So, Lena, what are women in the sandwich generation focused on financially? Like, how do you see them prioritize all of these money decisions? What are you hearing? I imagine they're probably putting themselves last, but how do they prioritize what's in front of them?
Yeah, and it is tough to focus on finances if you are in the panini. So what we see is that women are really trying to do it all. They are taking care of the loved ones. As many as 85% are the CFO of their household. They are basically taking care of all the consumption, all the budgeting and spending. Quite a number, over 40%, are also responsible for investing. And then majority are working outside of home. And so what we see is that oftentimes what really goes to the backseat is the career progression and the ability to generate as much income as they otherwise would. And we also see that what is just a very, very scarce commodity is time. So over 2/3 of the women in the study say that they simply don't have time to think about financial future, to have holistic planning conversations. And then income-wise, women are saying that having this multitude of responsibility really causes undue financial stress and emotional stress and limits their options for financial security.
So I want to remind everyone to take the poll. We're starting to get a few questions in here in the chat too. So Dr. Joe, before I get to you, I do want to ask Lena one of those questions come through. Myrna asking, can you please talk about ways to assist with finances for the caregiver's elderly parents? And that's interesting because that's another part of this, like decisions that your parents made or your partner's parents have made, putting additional pressure on you. It just continues to roll down with parents not having enough to pay for their own health care, as an example that she gives. Is part of a financial planning for your elders as well?
That is such a great question. And by the way, what we heard from women is that they're taking care of it all. All the family members rely on them. And so it's not an unusual situation that elderly parents would ask them for direct help or at least for involvement and advice, in what to do their finances. So there is a lot there, but the good news is that over 50% of respondents saying that having a financial advisor in their life really, really helps. It helps with confidence, and it helps with balancing the needs of the now, the many priorities we just talked about, with the needs for the future. Having a holistic financial plan, which certainly involves planning across the generation, elderly parents, the caregiver, the children, and involves the balance between the day-to-day, such as paying for ongoing medical expenses, making sure that you understand the budgeting, taking care of debt, as well as thinking about future and saving towards education, secure retirement, other priorities.
Jen, if I could pick up on what Lena was,
jump in.
Was saying, I think the other thing that we need to think about is that women uniquely, unfortunately, face a double jeopardy. While their careers, due to caregiving of children, parents, and sometimes grandparents, and increasingly their careers are staggered, stunted, and often stumble in terms of how much money they've been able to save. That's one jeopardy. But the other jeopardy is women also tend to live longer. So while they necessarily are coming up short on retirement, they're going to have more time in retirement that they need to finance.
Joe, it's so interesting. I'll even add the third. On top of those two, women also tend to have higher healthcare expenses themselves.
Yep.
So, I mean, you've studied, Dr. Joe, a lot about this longevity that I guess we're all blessed to have right now versus living 100 years ago. But as people live longer, these issues are with us for a longer period of time as well. I'm curious about two things. I mean, is there anything that we can learn from how men typically get ready for retirement that women can take away? Any lessons that for us in this?
You're putting me in a dangerous position of asking if women can learn something from men, which usually is more likely the other way.
It's okay.
So, I think that one of the things to think about is that men tend to be, shall we say, very unidimensional. They want to know in retirement, what's my number? What do I need that I'm going to be okay? And that's certainly not incorrect. But from women's point of view, it is woefully incomplete. So I would suggest, yes, be focused on what that number I'm going to need to be secure. However, because women are living longer, because they're the primary caregiver, and at some point they will be needing to receive care as well, they have a wider decision bracket. That is, they need to know their number, but where am I going to live? Who's going to care for me? Oh, by the way, the kids I sent to college, they just came back home. And by the way, my loved one is either ill or I'm providing care, or maybe they're gone for any number of reasons. The highest divorce rate in the world is amongst the 50 plus. And so I would learn about making sure you've got that financial security, but make sure that you've also weighed it, if you will, to all the practical things you will need, not just to live longer, but to live better.
So, Lena, there's a couple questions in here about things you can do to kind of attack this issue. And you've been talking about the financial planner, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but I just want to address a couple of questions in the chat. We've got a question from Linda Sanders about what are some key technologies that are available today that we collectively should ensure that we are leveraging. And Brenda had a question in here about books and online resources on the topic that you might be able to share with us. So, I mean, look, I think people want more information and specifically also want to know either online or technologies what they can do to try and get their financial house in order.
So I love these questions because women consistently self-report being much less confident than men in terms of their financial futures and financial decisions. And also within that, women may be used to doing the day-to-day budgeting, managing the consumption, but many are much less confident than men in the investing. So these questions educate right desire to do the first step, which is get educated, get confidence, whether it's financial literacy resources online, whether it's books, whether it's sources like friends who do this successfully and feel confident. That is all absolutely great. What I also say is that women report that working with advisors who get them in terms of really see their needs and their dreams, who guide them in terms of making the right financial decisions, and who make it easy for them, those relationships become so beneficial throughout the arch of their lives. And women say that they meet with advisors at least quarterly and benefit from that greatly.
Yeah, I
Dr.
think if I
Jen,
can write in on that, Jen, is that there's often a mistake when you look at some of the literature that comes out there about women not being confident, is sometimes mistakenly read as competent. Keep in mind, 51% of the population are women, but they have the majority of education, but they also make 85% of all the financial decision making, including cents and 90 cents dollar of healthcare overall. So largely, the quotes that we got from the research that I thought tells it all is that while she's dealing with today, she's not having the time to address the future. And that's where a financial advisor can play. Here's a great quote that I think shows what women are shouldering today. Who gives me permission to fail? So not only is she working and caring, she's doing everything else in the now. A financial advisor could be, shall we say, instrumental to make sure that she takes care of her tomorrow.
So, Dr. Joe, we have a question in here from Cynthia, which I think is it's really good. I kind of feel the same way, which is can we expect any policy changes to help our aging population? Look, is anyone going to be out there in the next 10, 20 years addressing these issues broadly in the country, or do you need to think, you know what, we're kind of in this on our own?
I do have to say that this is a profoundly personal and private problem that needs to be transformed into a public issue. And I would say right now that, AARP is probably leading the way in terms of caregiving initiatives in the states and at the federal level of a policy level. But it's also too complex just for government, just for employers, and certainly just for families. This is a systems issue that we need to start thinking about. How do we plan as families? How do employers provide different benefits and compensation packages, particularly for caregivers and particularly for female caregivers? And on a national level, how do we think about the nature of work and for us across the lifespan?
Lena, the financial advisor piece of this, in some ways, it feels like one more thing that you have to do. How important is it, though, and how much work do people need to think is going to be involved in getting yourself and your books and everything in order?
So it's interesting that you say that because women don't see it as one more thing to do. It's actually different. The quotes that I saw is that, you know, I am taking care of everybody else. Finally, there is somebody who prioritizes me, who takes the time to listen to me and understand what I want and what I need. So I hear kind of the opposite. There's this emotional relief of having the conversation with a financial advisor that goes kind of beyond the fundamentals in financial planning. That's one. And two, the relationships that I hear are most beneficial are not the relationship where there is massive amount of homework, you put all your books in order and you have sort of one meeting that solves it all. It's actually the opposite. It's creating periods in time, quarterly or more often, to have a conversation and to accomplish one thing at a time. Remember how strapped for time women are? So it allows this very gradual approach to getting the financial plan together, one building block at a time, and really balancing demands of the today with planning for the future.
And Lena, when should you start this?
Yesterday. So
Well, thanks.
consistent advice. Everybody, regardless of where they are, men or women, they say we just wished we started earlier. So it's never too late to start getting the road of right financial behaviors, minimizing debt, budgeting, saving, investing. Very important to start now. And again, there are gradual, step-by-step ways to do that.
And if I could
So,
suggest, it's
yeah.
not just starting early, but getting that financial advisor, if you will, to really navigate what are the things that you should be thinking about. As we talk about women living longer and doing all the amazing things that they do, one of the things we should also remember is that they tend to marry someone who's 2, 3, 4 years older than they are, and they tend to live upwards of 7 to 8 years longer. Effectively, women have a decade of retirement on their own. So while you may plan together, you should plan together, but realize at some point she is likely to be the one living alone, and to plan for that as well. And a financial advisor and shall we say, a very confident and supporting spouse or partner should help you think about what those years might be like.
Lena, Lily has a question in here talking about how people keep hearing that they need trusted advisors, but she says sadly those advisors often come at a price, and more often those prices can be very steep. How can women build generational wealth, especially those who live low to middle class? What should you expect in terms of fees? Can everybody do this?
So the good news is that there is a lot of transparency now. And by the way, certainly when it comes to picking an advisor, women should feel very confident that there is transparent information about fees and trust in that regard. Otherwise, pick somebody else. So the good news is that there are many advisors who are very much affordable, within reach for the middle class. And certainly we at Edward Jones have close to 20,000 financial advisors across North America who help men and women and their families be successful who fall into that category. So yes, I would really encourage you to look for an advisor who is transparent, who you could trust, who gets you, who makes it easy, and start working with them and start building that generational wealth over time and bringing in different members of the family together for those conversations.
In fact, those
That's
conversations come
poll
from
results.
multiple directions, Jen. Yep.
Yep.
Is it,
Hey,
about
Dr. I
those,
just want to go ahead. I just want to give
no,
these poll results real quick, and maybe it'll feed into what you've got, which is,
I
does
was just saying
caregiving inhibit your ability to
those
invest? We
conversations
only
that,
had 30% say yes. Does that surprise you? Did only 30% said yes? Does that surprise either of you? And somewhat another 30%. We had 39% say that, caregiving has not inhibited your ability to invest. Maybe it's not as dire as we think. I guess we have the majority, though, having some
No,
impact.
I,
Lena, does that go along with both of your thinking?
I think
Yeah. So first of all, I am super excited that there's 30% who say that they are still investing, that it hasn't impeded their ability. But it's fairly consistent with the results that 2/3 are saying that, yeah, it either has severe impact or, to a certain extent, impact. And again, it's a combination of things. It's both the means as well as the time and the sort of emotional presence to get engaged and make those decisions.
I would also say it's their expectations are at a different set point, which is I'm so busy dealing with the now. Given what I can do, I'm doing as much as I can do, and I'm doing, shall we say, good enough.
Yeah, and it's
I'm in between.
I was going to say, it's interesting that you said that. Another expression for financial advisor is sort of that accountability partner, right? Because it's so easy when you juggle so much and take care of everybody else to get completely focused on everybody else and on the today. So advisor is that accountability partner who say, have you thought about yourself? And
Right.
have you thought about the future?
It should be a question
Well,
that is standard, which should be, what about me, if you're a woman?
Well, we are going to leave it with that question. Everybody think about that. That is your takeaway. Thank you both so much. Thanks to Lena. Thanks to Dr. Joe. Thanks to Edward Jones.